us, because she's been talking to many members of the Israel Defense Forces as they get set to launch the ground offensive on Gaza. Shiv, you have a sharp military mind yourself. What's your best sense at this moment of how the Gaza operation is likely to go? And on the question of whether the moment Israel enters Gaza, it's quite likely that Hezbollah, Syria, and potentially even Iran could get involved.
Rahul, where I'm standing right now, which is the wall of the hostages, the wall of the kidnapped, as it were, in many ways answers your question about the complexities and the challenges before Israel as far as this ground operation is concerned, because there are no easy answers as to, why it hasn't happened so far, what scale it will assume. But the pictures of all these faces here, we understand to mark 20 days tomorrow, there's going to be a very, very intense crowd protest here in the heart of Tel Aviv. But to answer your question, yes, I have been interacting with IDF personnel, including people on the front lines near the Gaza front lines yesterday, and everything is completely ready, Rahul. If you look at it, the equipment, the tanks, the intelligence, it's all there. Phase 1 of this operation is already complete as far as air power is concerned, but 20 days in, there is an increasing sense that the window of opportunity for an effective ground invasion of the kind that the IDF had done in 2014 and 2009 is simply not available anymore. The reason for that is because the end game and the exit strategy has changed. In the past, Rahul, the sense is that any kind of ground invasion was about managing the levels of violence, knocking off a few of the leadership elements of the Hamas, and then, just managing the amount of threat that was there emanating from there. After October 7th, that calculation has completely changed, and for Israel, nothing is acceptable, nothing less than the complete obliteration of Hamas. And as you know, that's a very, very complicated proposition, given how widespread Hamas is. They've been gaining strength even in the West Bank, where they've never had much of a foundation. And then you've got this terror conclave where Iran has come out and started issuing these threats. Just 30 seconds more to answer your question about whether those other fronts will open. They've already opened. We reported from the West Bank where airstrikes happened for the second time in 3 days after 20 years, which is a huge thing as far as the West Bank is concerned. As far as the Hezbollah is concerned, there is a daily exchange of fire, very, very escalatory and happening much more often. Yesterday there was artillery pounding with Syria across the Golan Heights as well. So in effect, this isn't just 3 fronts, this is in fact 4 fronts. You've got Gaza, you've got the Hezbollah in Lebanon, you've got the West Bank, and you've got Syria. So this is on 4 fronts that it's happening. The ground operation isn't going to look like what it looked like before. I think it's going to be much more calibrated, Rahul. We do know special forces have started conducting search and operations as far south in Gaza as Khan Yunis, which is quite a big deal, but that still hasn't scaled up into a full-scale ground invasion.
Shiv, Aroor, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much for joining us, and keep up the good work with that reportage from Israel. Shiv Aroor there reporting for India Today. You can keep catching Shiv's dispatches all across the India Today network. Gaurav, you were in Israel speaking to different levels of officers in the Israel Defense Forces. How do they look at the question of Iran? Because it's one thing for Israel to go into Gaza. At some point in time, depending on the amount of days and weeks it takes, they will establish control over Gaza. That much seems quite militarily inevitable. But from what we've seen from the Iranian supreme leader and from what we know of Iran's designs, do you think we're building up potentially towards an Iran versus Israel conflict?
Rahul, it could even be bigger. The words that come from Turkey, the words that are coming from Egypt, this will be a wider conflict, and that's why the United States has 2 aircraft carrier strike groups in the Mediterranean Sea to ensure it doesn't become wider. But even Americans are under attack, both in Syria and in Iraq. American bases have been targeted by drones. 20 American soldiers have been injured. There were about 2,000 odd in Iraq, 900 odd in Syria, and they're increasingly coming under attack. And America has warned that there will be massive consequences in case Iran directly gets involved. So it's Israel and the United States on one side. You have British warships that are coming there. France says there's a wider coalition that's required against Hamas terror. So they're trying to limit this conflict to Hamas terror. But this meeting between Hezbollah, Hamas and the Islamic Jihad that took place in Beirut this morning, this shows that the effort on the Iranian side is to widen the scope, get get Russia and China involved in some way. Of course, all of this is just posturing at this stage. But the moment ground forces get committed, this war is unfortunately likely to expand, and it will impact, like the Russia-Ukraine war, not just the region, but the entire world in terms of oil prices, in terms of other countries getting involved in this conflict. Keeping it restricted to Israel and Hamas appears to be the global effort right now.
General Atta Hussain, Iran, even at this moment, involved through its proxies, like the Hezbollah. Do you think that's the way this is likely to stay? Or given the kind of belligerent comments that we're seeing from the Iranian Supreme Leader and from others in Iran, that we are inevitably heading in the direction of this becoming Israel versus Iran?
Thank you, Rahul. I don't think we have still got enough evidence to say that we are heading into a catastrophic all-out war yet. There is a lot of posturing taking place which inevitably happens. There's a tremendous amount of psychological warfare happening which also happens at some times like this. Influence operations are on. Meetings of this kind between terrorist groups in Beirut, etc. is again a part of posturing. Why I'm telling you this is because historically, Iran has succeeded with proxies all the while. Its experience of going to land-based warfare might remind you of the 8-9 years catastrophic Iran-Iraq war, in which Iran did not emerge anywhere. They had thousands of casualties, mines laid all over the place, wasted areas completely. And besides that, Iran and Israel do not enjoy a common border, except through Syria, through Levant, where you can have an exchange, a missilery exchange of rockets which can carry on, and the United States can come to the assistance of Israel to protect it over and above the Iron Dome. But that's not going to be all-out war. And I don't expect that Iran is going to step into the Levant, come into the area of the Golan Heights and start taking on Israel on the ground. No, that's not going to happen. So at the moment, very difficult to say, but I still hold my horses. I think we are still posturing, we are heading to a dangerous situation. Israel going into Gaza is almost certain, but whether it will go in alone, whether there will be a wider, a greater problem emerging on the northern borders, on the West Bank, etc. I would like to add a fifth front to what the various fronts which Shiv Aroor had also spoken about. We also got to look at the naval side. There's a lot of activity taking place from the sea. And that's the front from where all the infiltration and all the wherewithal normally comes into Gaza.
Abhijit Iyer Mitra, General Hussain's reading is this is a lot of posturing, influence operations. Iran has typically preferred to fight through its proxies. There is no land border with Israel, and that's the way it's likely to stay at this moment. While we are seeing belligerence, it's unlikely we'll actually see a direct military conflict between Iran and Israel. What's your reading, Abhijit?
Absolutely. Just 2 points, Rahul, if you don't mind me adding to a question you asked before. There's been a news report that's come out of the US, and that's what my colleagues in the Pentagon are telling me, is that there is US pressure on Israel to delay till US forces on the ground in the Middle East are fully deployed and additional assets are deployed till they get into full operational readiness to prevent a spread of the conflict. That's number one. Number two, there's apparently a serious Israeli second, third order consequence gauging happening right now. They only gauged the first order of consequence when they planned for the Gaza land invasion. Now they're looking at the second and third order effects, which is typically Israeli. I'm surprised that they hadn't done that already. But to answer specifically your question, Iran, sometimes I worry. We know, at least the Israelis are telling us, we don't really know, but the Israelis are telling us there's a very significant Iranian imprint on this. Iran gains a lot if Israel spends a lot of its time hammering Hamas and Gaza. Because remember, Hamas is not ideologically aligned to Iran. It is a Sunni organization, a Muslim Brotherhood-linked organization, which has never had good relations with Iran. In fact, they've been fighting each other in Syria viciously. If you remember, all the Al-Qaeda organizations up in the north were pretty much against the Iranian-backed Bashar al-Assad regime in the south of Syria. So, it makes perfect sense to me that if Iran is coordinating, it is coordinating so that Hamas takes the blow. But then the question is, what does Hezbollah do? There has to be a Hezbollah gameplay here that when Hamas takes the blow, Hezbollah takes a trophy home. So General Hasnain is absolutely right. They've perfected working with, sub-conventional warfare, essentially proxies, very well. But where does that game lead to? Number two, I suspect one of the games we're going to see is, if you remember in 1990, Saddam Hussein launched Scud missiles at Tel Aviv and Israel in general. I'm wondering at what point does Iran decide to do that and use that as an excuse to test a nuclear device and declare itself a nuclear power? I suspect one of these two trajectories, either Hezbollah making gains of some sort, I don't know what, or Iran playing its nuclear card.
Okay.